Welcome back to pottery class. I'm Lisa Ingram, and today we are going to make these butter dishes out of slabs. We're going to use texture to do the designs that you see on the handle and the tray, and we're going to learn how to make seams. So this is what we're going for. I will do a video where I show how to glaze these by hand if you chose to use the stroke and coat glazes, but you can skip that video if you chose to use one of the studio glazes that is applied after the first firing and before the second firing. So we'll get started. I'll go through the tools that we need and then we'll do the project. So I just have a few simple tools. This is my workspace. This is just a piece of wood, but you can work on top of cardboard. You can work on the box that your project came in. Anything that won't stick to the clay. I have a plastic fork. This is for scratching our clay to help attach it together. I have a paintbrush. I have a needle tool for cutting clay, but you can also use a toothpick if you don't have something like this. If you're an adult, an X-Acto knife is nice, but you have to be careful with it. I have a ruler. I'm really going to just use this for a straight edge, a bucket of water, a towel, and I have my stamp. So you have a stamp that came with your kit. Everything else, hopefully you can find around your house. All right, so here we go. I'm going to start with the piece to make the top of our butter dish. So we're gonna make this part first. So you can cut your bag open or gently pull it out. And then you can set it on your board smooth side up. You should have a smooth side and a canvas side. And so the first thing that you're going to do is just smooth out this smooth side. You can use your finger and you can do the long edges. You don't have to worry about the short edges. And there might be some impressions left from the plastic or from getting it in and out of the bag, and so now is just a good time to smooth those away and pay attention to these long edges, because these four sides are what make up these four sides. So that's good. Now I'm going to gently flip this. I let mine sit out a little bit, so I'm gonna give mine a spritz. If for some reason you walk away longer than you intend to and it feels a little dry, you can use some sort of spritz bottle to help rehydrate it. And so now I'll again smooth these long edges, but if it's soft, you don't have to spritz it. I just know mine is a little bit on the dry side, but if it's too soft, it's really hard to work with as well. So straight out of the bag, it should be just right. Maybe on a little bit of the soft side so you have some time to work with it while it dries. Okay, so our next step is we are going to make these corners. And so they flare out just a little bit. And the way that we're going to do that is on these V's, so there's a little V here and here, we're going to smush it. So we're not smushing the long straight sides or these shorter straight sides, because that's what makes our bottom. We're going to squish the clay where you see the darts. These are basically darts right here where clay was removed. So I'm just going in, let me hold this up to the camera. I'm just squishing in a little bit of the way. So it's about 1/2 inch, a little less towards the top. And I'll do that in all 4 of these V's. And I'm not pushing so hard that it's attaching it to the table. You can check for that by just gently pulling it up every so often. And when you pull it up, you want to pull by 2 of these sides so that it doesn't tear along that V that you have. And where we're squishing the clay is where the clay will overlap to make a seam. So we're making it a little bit thinner so that you can come back and press it together. So just imagine, that will help you imagine how much clay you need to press. So I'll give you another look at this. So I'm not coming very far in. Just a little bit less than the width of my finger. And you can turn this if you need to get better access to where you're working. It's okay to pick it up and move it around. Okay, I'm gonna make sure these sides still look smooth. All right, so at any point, feel free to pause this to take your time on a step or to step away to grab another tool, and then pick back up where you left off. So our next step, we're gonna take the plastic fork, and where you scored, or where you squeezed that clay and stretched it out, you're gonna score. You don't have to score on any of this other area, just along those areas that you pressed down. And if you don't have a plastic fork, you can use the toothpick to do this. And I'm not scratching very deep. I'm just getting the surface of it really. And this just opens up the surface of the clay so that it interlocks with the clay that it's attaching to, and this helps to prevent cracking and separation. All right, there we go. Okay, so when you get done with that, then you're going to do your water to make it sticky. So I'm just gonna dip my brush in the water and pat it on here. And I'm not trying to smooth my scratches back out. I'm just trying to make them a little bit wet. If it looks like you smoothed anything back out, you can re-score that. This brown clay is pretty good about keeping its seams, but I like to do anything that's gonna help me. So next, we're going to use our towel as we fold these sides up because it's gonna need a little bit of support. So I'm gonna roll this towel and it's going to be my support wall. This is an old towel. Kind of rolling it at a diagonal to make it nice and long. Okay, so he's ready. You can still see. Put that down here. Okay, so I'm gonna start here and I'm gonna slowly fold this upwards. Feel free to watch this part before you do yours so that you kind of know where you're going. And then I'm gonna take this side, and it's, as you can see on this one, it's a really rounded curve. It's not a fold. So gently, I'm going to bring these edges together and line up the bottom here so that it will sit flat. You want these to come in at the same height. And then from the bottom up, I'll start squeezing this together. So you're gonna have that outward flare of your clay. I'm gonna work this towel over here so that I've got some support now that my wall is upright. And I can rub the inside to help make that curve and that angle. And then just work up and down to give it a really good press and a really good seal. But I'm not squeezing so hard that the clay is getting paper thin. While I am applying pressure, my hands do not want to meet in the middle by any means. And then I can smooth this joint here at the bottom, and I can smooth the joint on the outside. We will flip this over and do a little bit more smoothing. On the inside, I can take this paintbrush, it won't be very wet at all, and smooth out the inside because you might have a little bit of mud coming from the edge. So that's your first seam, and that's how we're gonna do the rest of it. So I'm gonna add just a little more water on this seam right here because it's looking dry. My scoring looks okay, but I just want a little bit more on there. I'm gonna wrap this around to get it ready to support. And then I'm gonna slowly fold this little wall up. Then line up these bases so they are the same height. Then I'm gonna start again at the top and squeeze down. And I can see on the inside I've got some water coming out. You really want a good overlap here because this is what's holding your dish together. So you don't want a really skinny overlap. You want that whole scored 1/2 inch to be connecting with itself on the other side. So I'll smooth that seam a little bit, and then again take my paintbrush to clean up the middle. I'll pull this in just a little. Hope you can see that pretty good. Okay. And then we're going to do it again. So I'll wrap this towel. I'm gonna turn this so hopefully you can see pretty well. All right, so now we've got one more flap, but 2 seams. So I'm just gonna, again, do 1 seam at a time. I'll put a little bit of fresh water on here, and it's just a tiny bit that I'm dabbing on. It's really not a lot. Make sure that's good and ready to bond. And then line up the bottoms. Then press that little 1/2 inch overlap all the way to the bottom. You don't want to have any cracks here because that's going to eventually be the top. So you really want to make sure that that is coming all the way to the bottom. If you get really skinny edges, you can fold them over. That's totally fine. Okay. Sometimes I get 1 little finger of water. If you've watched my videos before, I love my 1 finger of water. If we put a lot of water in here, it just makes a really muddy mess, a really sticky muddy mess, but just a tiny bit of water goes a really long way and will help smooth. So I'm just kind of straightening up this edge right now, and we'll do some more of that in a minute. But that looks pretty good. I got my paintbrush. I'm gonna smooth that. And now I've got my last seam. I'm gonna re-wet that because I've got my heat on in here, so it is drying a little bit quickly. And then I'll overlap, line up the bottom, you know the drill, and squeeze it together. You know you're doing a good job squeezing if you can see the water squeezing out on the inside, and if you see your scoring disappeared. If you only scored a 1/2 inch, if you scored a whole inch in, then you don't want all of your scoring to disappear. You can come back and smooth that out with a paintbrush. But if you just scored about a 1/2 inch or a finger's width in, all of that should overlap and disappear. So all the way to the bottom, we don't want any holes at the bottom, and then I'll get my paintbrush. I get it wet and then tap it off on the towel and smooth that. So again, if you've got mud squeezing out or scoring showing, now is the time to really clean that up. I'm gonna wrap the towel all the way around, and then see, I've got an edge that's sort of curving out. I'm gonna work on that. and straighten it up. The cool thing is when we flip it, that's going to help us. That flipping is going to help these edges from coming out. But we are going to leave this to set up or dry for a little while we work on the other pieces. So it's going to have some time to just hang out and get stronger. So I really like to have a nice base here, a really nice smooth base, because this is what connects to the dish, and we don't want it to be scratching, we don't want it to be chipping. So just a really smooth bottom right here is what we're looking for. Okay, so this is what we've got. It kind of looks like just like a little box, and I'll just set this aside to dry for a little while we do the next step. So now you've got your rectangle. You have a 4x8 rectangle in your kit, so you can get that out next. And we're gonna use our stamp on this as well. Make sure that this is far enough away from you that you're not bumping it, because that's what I can tend to do, is bump my pieces if they're too close to where I'm working. So feel free to give yourself space. I'm gonna just slide that over a little bit. Okay, so here's our little 4x8 piece. It's a good idea to just flip this over and sign it right now. I have my little signature stamp. So I got my signature on there. You can tell which side is the bottom because one side is smooth and one side is textured. I love this textured side. It's got the canvas texture. I love this on my table. I feel like it just sets nicely with that little bit of texture that's there. But please do sign your piece. And if you can sign the top two as I fire it, that's really going to help me keep these together because they do fire separately. So again, with my 1 finger's worth of water, I am smoothing these edges. Then I'm gonna flip it and smooth these too. Should have done that while I was doing my signature, but that's okay. Second chance on doing a signature. All right, so now, this is the fun part. I mean, it's all fun, but this is really fun to me. So I have the little swirl stamp. There's flower stamps, rainbow stamps. This one's, I call it the rainbow one. But they're all pretty. So here we go. We are going to just stamp around the edges here and do a little design. So you can start in any corner that you want. You can do the whole stamp on, or you can do half of it on, half off. But I'm gonna do the whole stamp on and just side by side start to go around. So these stamps are made out of clay. Do a little half stamp right there. Let me show you how that half stamp looks. If you're like, oh no, I've just got a little half inch left, that's okay. We're gonna just do a little half stamp, that's fine. I like my stamps to be really tight together. I sort of rock it in too to make sure I get a really good impression from that stamp. But they are made out of clay that's been fired 1 time. So these are Bisqueware stamps, and they will get saturated. They will start to stick. So you kind of have to give them a rest every now and then if you're doing heavy stamping like this. If you got more than 1 stamp, you can alternate. But you can just kind of blow them off or hold them in front of a fan or get up and grab a drink if it does start to stick. So you'll know if your stamp is getting saturated because it starts to stick. So this is what I've got so far. I'm gonna do the last little stretch right here. But I really love to do textures. On Clay King They have a lot of textures, stamps and roller textures and all kinds of things. So that's a really fun place to look. So where we're going after this is we're going to turn up the edges. This is where the butter sits, so I like to keep that nice and smooth so that it's easy to wash. The butter doesn't get stuck down in there. I just keep the stamps on the edge as my decoration. So if you have anything you want to smooth off here in the middle, you can do that now. And I'm just going to, by hand, start to turn these edges up. So by turning up the edges, you do have to press down the part that you want flat. And so a butter stick is 5 inches long. These are going to be significantly longer than 5 inches because they shrink and because we have to have a lip. So you can try your butter in here and see how it fits, and it's gonna probably look like this is too big, but that's what we have planned. So again, I'm just lifting the bottom while I'm pressing down the base. So I'm lifting the edge from the bottom and smoothing the base. And then I'm gonna do that over here. The corners, I sort of just pinch these so that they are accented and point out a little bit. I'll scooch this and have my drink right there so you can see. So there's that corner. Just kind of pinch that gently together. And then I'll do this side. Okay, here we go. So I'm gonna lift and press, then just sort of let that corner poke out. Lift and press, because we are making sort of an angled fold here, a very gentle fold. And then another pinch here at the corner. And the nice thing is, since these tops, the edges will point out a little bit, they have somewhere to sit. So this design works well together. Okay. I'll pinch that last corner. And right here is your butter dish. So in my kids' camp, we did just this part. My daughter, who was 5 at the time, she made one, and she's so proud of it. And we do keep our butter on it, no lid or anything. And she loves it. So there's your little dish. And you can slide this over here. We'll let that sit. Okay, so now we're gonna do our handle. So I have my handle clay in this bag right here. You can pop it out. And this one's gonna have to bend pretty significantly. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna smooth it out with my 1 finger's worth of water. This will help loosen it up and make it nice and soft so that it's gonna bend, hopefully without cracking. So I want this just a little bit wider, so I'm gonna smooth it to flatten it out a little bit, just to widen it up, because this is plenty of clay for a handle. But I'm gonna layer 2 on top of each other. So this is where your ruler or your straight edge comes into play. So this handle over here, scrunched, is about 3 inches. So I'm gonna use my straight edge, and plastic will stick to wet clay, so I'm not pressing this on there very hard at all. So So I'm gonna get a straight edge, and watch before you do this so you're not like, oh, I wish I hadn't made that cut. I'm gonna make a thicker strip and a thinner strip. So you can make marks if you want to, like a 1/2 inch in, but I'm gonna eyeball it and then I'll measure it. Ooh, these look perfect, actually. Okay, so one is a hair over a 1/2 inch, and one is a hair under 1/2 inch. For some very precise measuring, there you go. And now I'm gonna chop these down, let's do 4 inches. So they've got some raggedy edges. You can use your toothpick or your knife or whatever you have. You can use a plastic knife. I think that would be fine. And I'll do 4.5 for now. I'll trim it down if I think it's too shy. So I have a skinny and one a little bit less skinny. So again, with my water, just a tiny bit of water to smooth this out, and then smooth out the thinner one. The thinner one's going on top of the thicker one. So this is what I'm gonna do. Get my plastic fork, and watch this part before you join me so that you kind of see where we're going and you decide what you want to do. Because you could just use this, either one of these, and make your handle and do no texture. But since I'm doing texture, I'm doing a double layer so that it's reinforced. Okay, so I scored the top down the middle of the thick one. The edges are still pretty smooth. I didn't go all the way to the edges. I'll do the back, the whole back, textured side, score the whole textured side of the thin one, and then add the water in between. Just tapping that water on. Then I'm gonna lay it on top. Yeah. And tap it together. Smooth it out, and then I'll use my paintbrush to smooth those seams. So we just have like a double-decker thing going on. It's really thick right now, but we're gonna thin it out with our stamp. Gotta get my hands clean off a little bit. Okay. So if this is wet, let it dry for a little bit, otherwise your stamp's gonna get pretty stuck in it. But what I'm gonna do, like I did on this handle, is do stamping all the way across. So it will stretch while you stamp, so just be prepared for that. I'll start here, wiggle it in, come a little closer. Here, wiggle it in. My clay's wet, so it's trying to stick, but we don't want it to. So I'm getting this cute little pattern right here. And you can see it's thinning a little bit, but I'm not squishing it to the table. I still need it to have some thickness so that this is a strong handle. Handles are the first thing to break, especially if you're glazing this at home before firing. Firing handles are really, really easy to break. So be so careful. And then once you get your stamps on it in whatever pattern you want, go ahead and inchworm it. So you're gonna be like, whoa, that's a pretty big handle. Well, that's okay, that's by design. We wanted it to be big so that we can trim off what we don't need. So this is what I mean by inchworming it. Let it have a hump in the middle and flat edges on the side. And then after we get the top, we can trim it down. Once we try it on, we'll trim it down. So that's just gonna hang out with my butter dish right now. Okay, so this is kind of funny. I made the last one I made, I put my little handle on top of the butter dish like this. And now I'm gonna pick up my lid. Feels a little bit more dry. And I put the lid on like so. Don't do this yet. And my daughter, who's 4, was like, no, Mommy, you made it wrong. That's not where the handle goes. She thought I had really messed up. And I was like, no, sweetie, I'm just letting it dry for a little bit. And the handle will stay nice and wet because I wanted the handle to stay soft while the lid dried. I was like, no, that's just how I'm, but I was like, what did I do wrong? Before I told her, no, I know what I'm doing. I was like, what did I do? Oh my goodness, thank you so much for telling me. But she was like, what is my mom doing? She can't do anything right. Anyway, that was cute. So I flipped this over. Feel yours. If it is still really, really soft, then let it dry for 20 minutes or so. Just keep checking on it in 5 or 10 minute increments. And then when it feels like you can flip it over, you can take the towel off and flip it over. So this is still soft. If I squeeze it, it will bend. But it's holding itself together. So I felt confident flipping this. So now I can rub these edges, and I get little cracks on the corners right here. This is a great time to rub those out and straighten up those seams. Then we're gonna do a little bit of decoration on the seams, and then we will do the handle. And that's it. So smoothing out these cracks just with my finger. I've used 1 finger's worth of water so far. You could use 2. You really don't want to make this whole thing shiny with water because then it's going to want to start sinking on itself, and that's no good. So for the seams, the little decoration that I like to do, which is optional, is with my paintbrush. Now, if you can work your stamp in here, that's fine. But because it's just such a thin spot to work with, and there's not much to press against, I find this to be very effective. So what I do is I just take the little thin end of a paintbrush and I twist it in to make a dot. Hopefully you can see that. I've got 1 finger on the other side to support it, and I've already smoothed this seam, so this is the last thing I have to do to it. Then I do the other side. And like I said, this is an optional design step that you can take or leave. But that's what it looks like. It's kind of fun, like a fun way to finish. Like buttons up the side. And then I do that around the piece. And again, if you will sign the inside of this as well, that will make sure that each butter dish comes home with its mate. I can't fire these together on top of each other because the whole butter dish here will have glaze on it, and I can't fire anything on top of something that's glazed because it melts and it will stick in the kiln. So if you can sign them, that will make sure everything goes together well. I would say I'd be able to tell by the glazes, but you may choose to glaze the bottom a different color than the top. And that's fine, but I don't want to assume everybody will glaze the bottom to match the top. They might be different. And 1 more corner to decorate. This is looking really cute. And letting this dry a little bit before you put on the handle or before you do this part is fine. You just want to come back to it before it's too hard to do anything to. So I like to do it all in one sitting so I don't miss that window. Okay, so there's that. This is a good time to try your piece out on your dish. If it's not sticky, if you feel like it's gotten dry enough, now's a really good time to see how does this work together, because they gotta work together. This is a lidded piece. Lidded pieces are super important to make sure that they work together. So then you can just adjust this to match the shape of your butter dish. If you've got a butter dish wall flaring out, you can see that from above and just kind of tuck it in to make it fit better. But this is looking pretty good. It gives you that gives you a pretty good visual of where we're going with this. All right, so I'm gonna take it off this dish. I'm happy with the fit. If you've got edges that are just flaring out too much, you may need to use your toothpick and trim the corners if they're just too much. Gentle trimming. All right, so I think that this is just a little bit too much handle, but you might like it. So it's up to you if you trim yours or not. I can't see yours. It's up to you. So I'm gonna use my needle tool. You can use your toothpick or whatever you have. And as I cut it, I'm gonna make it rounded. I want that end to be a soft end. So I will measure this. Curved, I'm at 3.5. So straight, I'm probably a little after 4, or right at that 4 mark. Okay. Making sure it's nice and smooth. You can tell I like to smooth a lot. And then we're gonna try it on, then we're gonna score and slip it down. So, I'm gonna stamp that down. I just stamped that end again to make it flatter. Do this one over here too. Trying to line the stamp back up, just like that. That's gonna give it a good foot to hold it. See that? Okay, here we go. Here we go. Gonna try it on. Make sure this is in the middle. I've got 1.25 inches on that side and 1 inch on this side, so I've got to scoot over 1/8 of an inch. So now I've got about 1 1/8 over there and 1 1/8 over here. Okay, and then I'm gonna make sure it looks like it's right down the middle here. It's harder to measure here because it's a rounded edge. It's a lot more rounded, but I'm going to take my needle tool, cut under really gently right there to make a mark, and cut under really gently right here. Take this off and score in about 1/2 of an inch where that is going to sit on both sides. And then I'll score this. Like so. And then you know what to do. Water, water, and then with a very gentle hand, you're gonna wiggle that on there. If you smush, the whole piece will smush. So with a gentle pressure, you're gonna push down, and if you can get your finger under there for some counter pressure underneath, do it. Counter pressure is the best kind of pressure in pottery. So you can adjust your curve. Make sure you can fit a finger under there. That's important. Fit is important. Function is really important for functional pieces. Then that was a lot of water. You can clean up around the edges with your paintbrush. And just so you get a visual, I'll give you the final product here. Here we go. A swirly stamped slab butter dish. There you go. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck. I know that you'll do an awesome job, and if you are glazing at home, then check the description below for the link to part 2 on glazing your butter dish. Leave me a question and please subscribe. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.